Hello and welcome to this virtual tour of St. John's Cathedral. Father Ed Estock here, and it's a pleasure to welcome you. I am standing at the cross aisle in the front of the sanctuary of St. John's Cathedral. It's the mother church of the Diocese of Cleveland, and it gets its title of Cathedral from the chair that is standing in the center of the back of the sanctuary. It has the coat of arms of Bishop Edward Malesic on it, and that in Latin, that chair is called cathedra, and cathedra is the root word of cathedral. So every diocese throughout the world, there's about 5,000 dioceses throughout the world. Every diocese has a cathedral church, every diocese has a bishop, and every cathedral has a cathedra. It is the sign of the teaching office of the bishop in the midst of the church. This cathedral church was built for the very first time in 1848. So we are coming up on the 175th anniversary of the Diocese of Cleveland, and pretty soon the anniversary of the cathedral church. The version of the cathedral church that was built in 1848, still some of it remains visible in the church today. This church was rebuilt in 1948 on the 100th anniversary of the Diocese of Cleveland, and it was dramatically redesigned in 1977 for the last time. What is still existing from the 1848 version of St. John's Cathedral are the two side walls, and you will see them with the stained glass windows in them. Those two side walls were the only thing left standing when the church was remodeled and rebuilt in 1948. The pillars that are going down through the body of the cathedral are also original equipment up to the top of the capitals of the pillars. As you'll notice when we move to the sanctuary area, there are 6 new pillars that were added. 8 new pillars that were added to the church in 1948 renovation. The window holes, of course, in the side walls are also original to the building in 1848. However, the stained glass windows that are manufactured by the Manns Company in Munich, Germany, those windows were not installed until 1900, when we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the cathedral church. So that window, if you would notice them, is very similar to the window in St. Albert the Great Eucharistic Chapel. In 2005, Father Weil went to Germany and commissioned the window of the Last Supper that is present in the St. Albert the Great Adoration Chapel by this same company. And so you will recognize in this window very similar artistry and form and shape and color to the one at St. Albert the Great. The 1948 rebuilding of the cathedral on the 100th anniversary, and at that time the roof was removed and the back wall of the cathedral that was just about where this altar is standing right now. That was the back wall of the cathedral, and the front of the church had a bell tower. The bell tower was removed as well. And they added the 3 transepts that are standing here beside me. We have the left-hand side, which is called, we refer to it as the Sacred Heart nave. We have the right-hand side, or the south nave, which is called Our Lady Chapel, and we have the central nave, or the chancel, where the high altar was installed in 1948. If you remember, prior to the Second Vatican Council, the altars in Catholic churches were up against the back wall, and the priest would celebrate Mass facing to the east, with his back to the people, if you will. In the renovations of the Second Vatican Council, the altar was moved down away from the wall, and the priest has taken his place, typically facing the people behind the altar. In 1977, the high altar, therefore, was taken down from the back wall, and this section of pews was removed, and they extended the sanctuary by this black and white marble. They then took the pedestal from the high altar and recreated a new altar table according to the guidelines of the Second Vatican Council. However, the base of this altar is the same one from 1948. What is unique here on this altar, and I hope you will notice, is the image of the mother pelican. The mother pelican is an ancient icon or an image of the Holy Eucharist, at least of Jesus and the Holy Eucharist. The myth of the pelican is that in times of drought and famine, the mother pelican will pierce her own flesh in order to feed her chicks. You see in this image, there are four baby pelicans in the nest, and the mother pelican is piercing her own chest and her flesh and feeding her children. Thus, we can see the image of Jesus Christ in the Eucharist feeding the children of the church with his body and blood, his own flesh and blood. You'll also notice the ambo, which is the place where the Word of God is proclaimed. Sometimes, I often thought it was a picture of St. John the Evangelist on the front of the pulpit. However, it is a statue of St. Stephen, the first martyr of the church. And he is holding in his hand, it looks like baguettes or some little muffins, and actually those are the stones by which Stephen was martyred. He's the first deacon of the church, and he is celebrated in this ambo. The other feature of the sanctuary you should notice is, as I mentioned, is the cathedra. It is the bishop's chair, and we will take a closer look at the chair as we move into the sanctuary. Here we have the bishop's cathedra, or the bishop's chair, and you can see that it is surrounded by an accompanying presbyterium, as we call it. Not Presbyterian, but presbyterium. It is the place for the presbyters to sit. So this is a bench where concelebrating bishops and priests sit as they are celebrating the Mass in communion with the bishop. The bishop's throne or chair is here in white marble. As I mentioned to you, the bishop's chair, as in most cathedral churches, is marked by his coat of arms. Heraldic coats of arms are something that prelates of the church or the hierarchy of the church have used for centuries. And it is worth taking a look at and understanding this coat of arms. It belongs to Bishop Edward Malesic because he is the bishop of the Diocese of Cleveland. As in heraldry of old, with knights and kings and queens, this coat of arms has been created by the marriage of two coats of arms. As you'll see on this side is the coat of arms of the Diocese of Cleveland. So the black and white and silver chevrons. This is the coat of arms of the Diocese of Cleveland. On this side, when a priest is named a bishop in the Catholic Church, it is imposed upon him that he should come up with a coat of arms and a motto. And so what we have here is Bishop Edward Malesich's coat of arms. And it has a linden tree, it has an Edwardian crown because of his first name, and it has some three-leaf clovers and a silver chevron that looks very much like the Diocese of Cleveland. When Bishop Malesich was named to be Bishop of Cleveland, they took this coat of arms and they impaled it, seems to mean, is they put it together with the Church of the Diocese of Cleveland, because we do understand the bishop to be the bridegroom of the church. And so in this heraldry, we are seeing the symbolic marriage of Edward Malesich, the high priest and the bridegroom, to his bride, the Church of the Diocese of Cleveland. As I mentioned, the bishop has also chosen a motto, and his motto is "Serve the Lord with gladness." So, and this green hat and tassels are prescribed by the Vatican for anybody who is a Catholic bishop. And what you'll notice here is there are 3 rows of tassels. Now, if Bishop Malesich was an archbishop, there would be 4 rows of tassels. If he was a cardinal of the church, there would be 5 rows of cardinals. And if you look at the Pope's coat of arms, there are 6 rows of these tassels. That is prescribed by the Vatican and by a papal decree. This is also a processional cross in the background. As I mentioned, in the 1948 expansion and rebuilding of the cathedral, the high altar was up against the back wall here, and you see what they call as the Reredos. And that Reredos was hand carved by 30 wood carvers right here inside the cathedral in the 1948, 46 to 48 is actually the time of the rebuilding. And it has the 4 apostles, the evangelists, and John the Evangelist, of course, it's in the top spot. And we have St. Peter and St. Paul. As with most statues, I mentioned St. Stephen with the instruments of his martyrdom. You'll notice in the hands of St. Peter are the keys. So that's how we know a statue is St. Peter, if there's not a name on it, is he's usually holding the keys to the kingdom of God that Jesus gave to him. St. Paul, on the other hand, is often shown with a sword in his hand. And the sword has 2 meanings. The first is that it is the way that St. Paul died for Christ. He was beheaded with the sword. But also, the Bible tells us that the Word of God is like a 2-edged sword. And St. Paul, of course, was the great preacher and theologian and teacher of the faith. The other statues, the smaller ones surrounding the sanctuary, are the patron saints of the principal countries where immigrants from Cleveland had migrated from. And so there's St. Patrick for the Irish people, and St. Cyril and Methodius for the Slovak people. I believe St. Jerome is up there, and St. Augustine, and several other fathers of the church, saints, patron saints of the ethnic groups in Cleveland. You know, ethnic religious identity is very strong in the history of the Diocese of Cleveland. In the Our Lady nave, as you can see in the picture, that is a blue glass mosaic surrounding the principal statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Also, the painting, which is difficult to see because of the lighting in the cathedral, the painting on this wall and on the Sacred Heart wall is done in an ancient and a rare form of artwork. It's called fresco. And the way, if you go to Europe, all the churches in Europe have this form of art. The way they construct this is by putting the wet plaster up on the wall and then painting onto the wet plaster so that the paint goes into the plaster. The result is that this is a very durable and long-lasting art form because the paint is permanently embedded in the plaster. You'll see in the nave of the Sacred Heart, the north nave, while in Mary's nave, those were the scenes from the Holy Rosary, the life of Mary. This fresco is the last judgment from John the Evangelist's book of Revelation. And you can see to the left is a statue, an image of St. John the Evangelist looking up at the fresco painting, because, as you will remember from the book of Revelation, he says, I, John, was carried off to the Isle of Patmos, and he had a great vision there. And he wrote that vision down, and the vision that he wrote down is imaged in the fresco painting on the wall. In the 150th anniversary of the Diocese of Cleveland, the Eparchy of Parma, which is the Byzantine Catholic diocese, gave a gift to the Bishop of Cleveland on the occasion of the 150th anniversary, and it is this icon. So icons are a very typical religious art produced by the Orthodox and the Eastern rites of the Catholic Church, of which the Byzantine diocese is one. And so you will notice the typical features of iconography. However, in this icon, you can see that the man in the picture has a miniature image of St. John's Cathedral in his arms. So that designates this man in this picture to be the patron saint of that church and of the diocese. Those of you that are familiar with St. Albert the Great Church know that I had commissioned in 2015 an image of St. Albert the Great, and who is the patron saint of our church. And like this one, inspired by this one actually, I had the artist put a miniature version of St. Albert the Great Church in St. Albert's arms, indicating that he is the patron saint. As in most cathedral churches, there is a burial crypt in the church because of our tradition of burying the bishop of the diocese in the crypt within the cathedral church. That is the case here in the Diocese of Cleveland, and behind me here is what we call the Resurrection Chapel, and it is the burial place of the bishops of Cleveland. There have been 12 bishops of Cleveland, and of course Bishop Mlesic is number 12, so he's still alive and well. He was preceded by Archbishop Perez, who was transferred to the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. So number 11 has escaped us, if you will, and he is off to Philadelphia. Prior to Bishop Perez's coming to the diocese was Bishop Richard Lennon. He was number 10, and Bishop Anthony Pilla was number 9. And as you probably are aware, Bishop Lennon passed away in 2019, and Bishop Pilla just recently passed away and was buried here in 2021, just in September. So we'll go into the crypt. Prior to that, Archbishop James Hickey, who became a cardinal archbishop of the church in Washington, D.C., he was the Bishop of Cleveland. He was the 8th Bishop of Cleveland. And he, of course, has also escaped our cathedral crypt, and he is buried in St. Matthew's Cathedral in Washington, D.C. So the other however many, 7 or 8 bishops who have died as the Bishop of Cleveland and are buried here in the crypt. In the entranceway of the burial crypt are 2 prominent figures in the history of the Diocese of Cleveland. The one, is, of course, is the bishop who designed and oversaw the rebuilding of the cathedral in 1948. His name is Edward F. Hoban, and he was an honorary archbishop. He was preceded in his ministry here by Joseph Schrems, and Joseph Schrems is the other person buried here in the grand entrance of this crypt. Why I wanted to stop and show you is that you see the coat of arms of Bishop Schrems. And as with Bishop Malesic, on the left-hand side over here, that is the coat of arms of the Diocese of Cleveland. And then you see Bishop Schrems' personal coat of arms, and they've been impaled, if you will, together. But you'll also notice that because Archbishop Schrems was also an honorary archbishop, he has 4 levels of tassels. Remember, I was telling you about the tassels. So that those are 4 levels of tassels on an archbishop's coat of arms. Friends, this is the inner crypt where there are 12 burial places. And as I mentioned to you, 8 of them are filled. So you can see them lined along the side of the wall. And in the center of this chapel, under the small altar there, is a full body relic of a Roman martyr. So I should probably define all those terms. A relic is something that belonged to or a piece of the body of a saint. And when I said this saint is a full body relic, what I mean is it is the entire skeleton of a Roman martyr. Something else unusual about it, and I apologize if it's startling for you to see, is there are only 2 Roman martyrs remains in the United States of America. And I mentioned Bishop Schrems to you. Bishop Schrems had helped the Pope, I believe Pius XI, he helped the Pope to excavate underneath St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And so he sent money. And in return, and in acknowledgement for the great gift, the Pope sent to Bishop Schrems, Archbishop Schrems, this relic of a Roman saint, a Roman martyr. They name her Christine. But before we get too sure that that was her name, the name Christine in Latin simply means a young Christian girl. So, but we have known her as St. Christine, and that is her full body relic. Lastly, I just thought, because I had mentioned him, and you know I was a dear friend of Bishop Pilla, and was celebrating his funeral just this past September. And so he is in his newly crafted tomb here in the chapel.